So I'm going to talk about identity, but I'm not going to talk about the blockchain. I guess I was invited here because we are conceptually, philosophically, we share the idea of distribution, and that's why we have been included in this panel. My name is Bjorn. I'm a co-founder of Single ID. We are a startup based in Bulgaria. Myself, I'm German. My co-founder is Italian. And let's jump right into it. So, identity is all-encompassing. Every digital service that we want to use needs to know who we are, right? And because it's different, like from the real world, where we have somebody face-to-face. Problem is, this is a very painful exercise. Indeed, it's we can also call it user onboarding, because in a world where we have smaller and smaller screens, it is just very difficult to always fill out a registration form. Because at the end of the day, that's what registration is. For a first-time visitor, you fill out a registration form. And this results in registration fatigue, and is also responsible for the high number of abandonment rates in e-commerce, which are staggering 66% from the desktop and almost over 90% from mobile devices. So people put stuff in their shopping cart. When they come to checkout, they see the form, and then they just go away because they just say it's frustrating. So people have started to think about this. Well, shortcuts. What's a better way to do this? And the original traditional answer has been, okay, let's create a password, right? You create a password. It doesn't help you really for the first time, but at least it helps you when you come back, that you don't have to give your long-form information each and every time, as you would, for example, if you check out as a guest. The problem is, passwords are really a pain in the butt, right? There are these rules, use uppercase, lowercase, letters, don't use your pet name, and all these kind of things. And this is causing password fatigue. So we have registration fatigue, we have password fatigue. And not only do we have password fatigue, but nowadays, the reality is, we don't have just one account or two. Then we might even be able to manage it. But we have like easily 100 nowadays. Yeah? So there's password overload. So what does all this tell us? It tells us that identity, the way it works today, works like this. It is pretty much a silo system. Every service runs its own identity process. It's embedded in their service. Identity is not recognizable as a separate product or service. And this results in massive data duplication, like MyData are spread all over the internet, I don't even know where, probably 20, 40, 50 times. Think about what this does for your attack surface also, yeah? So people have started to think further and enter these guys. If we have to create an account each and every time, and that causes people not to use the service, how can we make it possible to make it interoperable? And so the idea was born, single sign-on. You sign on with one identity that you have created elsewhere, with the credentials that this third party has given to you, and make it a model. Also called identity providers. I mean, we're keeping it simple now. The most famous ones we have all encountered. They're called social sign-on. Log in with Facebook, Twitter, Google, and so forth. The problem of these guys is they're centralized systems. They all work pretty much on this architecture, hub and spoke. You have a very massive central database that stores all the data of all the users all over the world, and all these services, I mean the businesses that rely on this, they're called the relying parties, they are around and the users are around. And the protocol on which all of these systems run, it's called OAuth, OpenID Connect. They're very massive systems. And to summarize it, what an identity provider actually performs in terms of functions is this. He identifies you because he keeps your you give them your data in the first on the first visit. He custodizes your data, and he shares your data, which is actually also identical with tracking you. This is the reality. So, can we trust these guys? Of course we can't, because for one, you create a single point of failure. And that goes both ways, by the way. It goes also for the businesses. If the Facebook server is down, your customers cannot reach you if you're using login with Facebook. And the second problem is this. If you have a big database, then you're kind of that light up there. And all these moths that are flying around it are all the hackers in the world. So, the bigger your database, the bigger your data breach risk. Another problem is, all these services, they track you, every single move you do, and they share it with all the other services that you're logging into. So we also have the problem of data aggregation, meaning that we have all different roles. We are a parent, we are a private person, we have hobbies, we have jobs, maybe several jobs. All these identities cannot be kept separate by definition under that system, and they're all being lumped together. That's what Google does, that's what Facebook does. It's a big problem. In the real world, maybe somebody doesn't know if I'm going to play poker every Thursday night. But if I'm doing it online, then everybody will know. At least Facebook will, and Google will. And what's going to happen with all these data? Well, they're monetizing it. So, now that's interesting. What does Ben & Jerry's ice cream have to do with this? I'm going to tell you. The advantage of single sign-on isn't actually that great after all, if you think about it. Because if I log in with my Facebook account to a third-party site, I still need to input there my username and my Facebook password. Well, generally, when that happens, I don't even know that, because when I go to Facebook, I'm using the Facebook app. I don't remember it. So I have to go look it up. I wrote it down somewhere. I have to do that already. So it's I'm being asked to input this information. And then, how many attributes does Facebook really have about me? In terms, we're talking identity. We're not talking about all the other information, personal data trails that I'm leaving, as I mentioned before. We're talking in terms of identity. Today, Facebook has maybe they have my name, they have maybe my birth date, they have my email, and in the future they will have my telephone number if you're using WhatsApp. So at the end of the day, if I want to do a transaction, I have filled in maybe 3-4 attributes of the checkout form, and the rest I still have to do it manually. So that's why I'm saying single sign-on does not solve the problem, it's only a half-baked solution. So all this means that the identity provider model is broken. And this is exactly the middle of my presentation. Now I'm going to talk about the good things and the hope that there is out there for the future. And I've only spoken 8 minutes, so I'm doing fine. So wouldn't it be nice if we could square the circle? If we could have something that is usable, but doesn't compromise on security and on privacy, and that is user-centric. And indeed, we can, and the solution is called Single ID, and that's exactly what we do. And I will tell you how we do that. We did that. At the end of the day, when you think about it, it's not that complicated if you sit down and apply yourself to that. We made 2 fundamental design changes to how everybody else operates. The first one is no central database. And by no central database, I mean not this and not this. So even the middle solution, having like a lot of smaller central databases so not to let it get too big, is still not the solution. So what you want to have is a distributed network, and I'm going to explain to you later exactly how that works. And the second change we made, we reversed the existing paradigm of how we log in. Oops, sorry, something happened. Where is it? Okay. The way we log in today is you go onto a site and the site asks you for your credentials, or if you don't have any credentials, then to fill out the form. So the site asks you to give them your information, to input it. Said, what if we turn this around? What if I have this data on my smartphone and get everybody that needs my data to ask me for approval for that, and I give it to them. And this is conceptually how it works. We have these three entities. We have the user's smartphone, we have the target system in which the user wants to log in, and in the middle is the single ID server. So the user downloads the app from the App Store and gets assigned a unique identifier, and then he pre-compiles a registration form, or we call it a profile, with all the relevant data that he might be, and it's segmented in different groups, that he might be requested to provide for a login. Then he goes to the site, which needs to be a compliant site. They need to have our plugin, to the single ID, to the login with single ID button, and inputs his identifier. And this triggers a push notification, which arrives at our server, and we know, there's a request for data for that particular single ID, and what we do is we forward it. And what does that do? This creates a direct SSL connection between these two subjects that can then exchange information. It's not one directional, it can actually go back and forth. So the result is that my identity, which was first stored in my smartphone, is by that way transferred in one batch to the target site. And I'm going to show you in a little video how that works. I was thinking of doing a live demo, but then because of the Wi-Fi, I wasn't sure about it, and also you won't be able to see what happens on this screen. So here we have it side by side, so I'll show you the video, but anybody who's interested, I can demo it to you after the session to see how it works in real life. So, by the way, and this flow is patented. So here is the little video, and it describes what I just showed you. You see the single ID on my home screen of my app, and on the left you see a typical registration form where I now input my identifier and just press go. So this is live, it's not cut, it's not edited. A few seconds later I receive the push notification on my smartphone, and it tells me exactly which data it wants and where it is from. And then I just approve, one tap, and then a whole registration form with, I don't know, in this case, 60 or something attributes is filled. And I'm just scrolling down for you to see. It's including personal data, billing data, shipping data, even scans of my documents. So all that stuff in one batch. So this is really usable. So let's a few observations to that. I mean, first, it's super fast. So with it, this will help a lot in user onboarding, especially e-commerce settings, where, and especially in settings like, say, travel, when you buy a plane ticket where you have a very high number of attributes that you need to fill out. And also, you may have not grasped that yet, but this is to symbolize that there's no more difference between sign up and sign in. Meaning, whether I'm a first-time visitor to a site or a returning visitor and whether I'm coming for the 5th or 10th or 50th time, every time I am sending all my registration data, the full list of attributes. I'm not logging in with a password. I'm just sending all my data each and every time. So it doesn't matter whether I'm a registered user or a guest user. There's no more difference. The two become one and the same. It's one user experience. And I think that's very good. Next thing, I already mentioned it, there's no password. Which doesn't mean that you don't have any security. We still have a two-factor authentication of sorts. The first one is we're using your smartphone as a token. Yeah, it's like basically your bank token, but now it's a smartphone. And the second one, in this push notification that you saw, there is an embedded one-time password, and your consent is by actually sending your data, your consent is implied. So that's the security. It's actually also two-factor authentication. The second implication this has, and this is the vision that we have, is if that is the case, then as a merchant, I don't have to store any data anymore. Because why am I doing it today? I'm doing it today for convenience, so that people don't have to give me their data each and every time. But if I have found a way, if there is a way to do this in a simple, one-tap manner, then I can do away with that. At least with most of the data. I will still want to do some data profiling and habits and history, whatever. But I mean, I can get rid of everything that's sensitive, that's going to maybe going to be a risk for me. And we've seen that, as Bruce Schneier has recently put this, we've increasingly is sinking in that data is not only a good thing, but data is a toxic asset. We've seen that in big data breach cases like the Target case, for example, where the CEO lost his job, hundreds of millions in damages had to be paid out, and so forth. So this is something that's really now slowly being understood, that data not only has a value, but it also has a cost. And this has been neglected up until now, but it's something that's becoming more and more real. And what's helping in this context, of course, is the GDPR that Marcus has mentioned already before, because in the future there will be pretty tough penalties that will be applicable to breaches. So that's one thing that we can envision for the future, that we can basically reduce the data duplication that is the rule today. Another aspect that I want to highlight is we can actually manage multiple profiles, all under that same single identifier, or unique identifier, single ID. And here you see a screenshot, that's from my phone, which shows the screen with my profiles. And I have there 6 different profiles. So I can actually have a profile for my business use with my business credit card. I have one for my personal use. I will maybe have, I'm a poker player, I will probably want to have an anonymous profile, or one with a prepaid Skrill card, and so forth. Or I can just have one that's called anonymous to log into Wi-Fi hotspots, whatever. I mean, that's the beauty. I can keep my personas separate, which is not possible today. The other thing is, we are really truly 100% zero knowledge. There's no data on our server whatsoever. Every user is the custodian of their own data, and no data are on our server. We don't even know, you don't register, you don't create an account with us. The only thing we know is, this particular device in iPhone 6 Plus has downloaded a new app, and that's all we know. We don't know who's behind it, and we will never see whether a transaction that's initiated by you will be completed, because we only get the request for the data request from the merchant side and forward it to you, but then afterwards there's a direct connection between the two of you. Remember the graphic I showed you before. So what does that do for security? It's destroying the economics of hacking, because as I mentioned before, remember the light with the moths? Data is valuable if you have millions of user accounts that you can get to. no one will be interested in your single phone, despite of what sometimes is being talked about in the media, unless maybe you're a celebrity and there's a special interest and that has a different economic value. But typically, no one will be interested in your own phone, and the phone is probably the most secure data storage item that's out there. This also means another thing. Because of the reverse login, there's actually no more phishing. Because phishing, as you remember, you have to input data into a third-party site. But if you only have to be, can input data if you're being solicited by a push notification, you can, and that can only come from a legitimate source, phishing is basically eliminated. And the same is true for man-in-the-middle attacks. Security I already mentioned. We encrypt at REST. So AES 256 is used to encrypt your profile data on your smartphone. One little interesting twist here is the decryption keys are on our server. So when you have no internet connection, basically your smartphone has your app has a black screen. And if you lose your phone, there's a very easy remote lock feature from your smartphone that basically will block your password on our server, and then no one can use anything with your do anything with your phone if it's being found. And in transit, I already mentioned we do SSL. Another feature that is really cool, I think, this allows you to track your own digital footprint. And I'm not talking letting somebody else doing that, because that's being done anyway, but you do it yourself, because you don't have no overview. Who you sent your data to, where you logged in this week, last month, whatever. And with this, it's possible to do. You see a screenshot on the right-hand side. Basically, I think this was in, July? Obviously there are not that many sites where we can use it, so it's mostly only our test site. And you basically will have an overview of, so this is what I did last month, this is what I did last week, this is whom I sent my data. That's a pretty handy kind of thing. Another thing that's worth noting is the scalability of attributes. Now we have about 100. We can easily do 200. We can include digital signatures, so you can get higher levels of assurance. You can get your profile certified by a certificate authority, and we include this digital signature as a text file in the data attributes that are being sent to the target website. All this is possible. And for transparency, we believe in security through transparency. The communications protocol is published on GitHub. Any skilled programmer can check what our communications protocol does in less than half a day. And that's very different from all these complex public key, private key, high complex encryption schemes that take half a year to check, and no one really knows whether they don't have a loophole. So what is it in a summary? SingleID is a permission-based, self-sovereign data sharing platform connecting two unrelated parties on demand, permitting a secure and private data exchange without the need of either a password, a trusted intermediary, an SMS, or public and private keys. Quick word just on use cases, categories. 2 minutes and I'm done. Just remember, identity we mentioned in the beginning without being specific has three iterations. The first is identification, like when I register, when I was a first-time visitor. Authentication is when I return as a visitor and I provide my credentials. And the third is authorization. That's what you do when you go and authorize a bank transaction. So that's basically specific acts permitted to an authenticated user. So what kind of use cases are thinkable? There's obviously e-commerce is the biggest. Access management in the sense of a two-factor authentication that's passwordless. Banking, I mentioned. You can also use it offline. Basically, if you go check into a hotel or a rental car company, you can just, in the same way as you do it online, you can just give all your information to the other side, and that will speed up matters. And we are also working, it's not implemented yet in the app today, use it as a peer-to-peer function. Like, remember Bump, the app for like sending V-cards. So we have this reference app that we created that works. And what we are basically proposing is that we offer the API for this feature to anybody else who wants to integrate it into their own app to become a single ID compliant app that allows people to log in more easily, and definitely it's only payable for commercial use. Non-commercial use is free. So this is it. Thank you very much. We are here all 3 days. If you want to talk to us,